It's been reported that COVID-19 is associated with increased incidence of thromboembolism, though it varies depending on patient population and settings. To discuss all this, I have Professor Rupan Arya with me. Professor Rupan Arya is a professor of thrombosis and hemostasis at King's College Hospital in London. He has been national lead for VT and is director of the National VT Exemplar Centers Network in England. He has extensive clinical and research experience of thrombosis and COVID-19. Professor Arya, welcome to Podcast ISCCM.
Thank you for the kind invitation to join with you today, and I welcome the opportunity to share my experience.
Professor Arya, from early days of COVID-19 pandemic, distinct coagulation disturbance of SARS-CoV-2 infection has been recognized. There have been various published autopsy series describing macrothrombosis in multiple organs. So my first question to you is COVID-19 a thrombotic disease?
I think there's little doubt that COVID-19 is associated with extraordinary burden of thrombosis. It became clear quite early on that nearly half the patients with COVID-19 disease have changes in the blood clotting associated with the hyperinflammation caused by the virus. And there is an increased risk of thrombosis. In our own study from King's, we found 5% of hospitalized patients with COVID-19 had evidence of venous thromboembolism, and about 16% of critical care patients, 4% of ward patients. And this was despite the use of standard thromboprophylaxis. So the rates of blood clots are about 2 or 3-fold increased compared to previous data. And the pathophysiology of why there's thrombosis in COVID-19 is also very interesting. It's been dubbed immunothrombosis or thromboinflammation, which is a combination of coagulopathy along with endothelial or microvascular damage. The inflammation associated with the viral infection results in cytokine release that affects the contact, complement, net pathway, and also the viral adhesion to the ACE2 receptor causes microvascular damage and microvascular thrombosis.
So that's quite interesting. I mean, you just very clearly told us it's kind of a thrombotic disease, and you also explained the pathophysiology in that. So you have your studies, as you quoted, there has been increased incidence of thromboembolism. So is there an evidence to tell us anticoagulation helps in COVID-19? Because I believe you just really said even those incidences were on the prophylaxis doses as well. So how is it going to help in COVID-19?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think we are aware that there is a very big risk of venous thromboembolism in patients severe enough to be hospitalized with COVID-19 disease. And yes, the prothrombotic state is such that at times it has overwhelmed standard approaches to prophylaxis. But I think our current approach is to assume that all the patients severe enough to be hospitalized are at a high risk of thrombosis. So we need to then assess the bleeding risk. And if the bleeding risk is not high, then to administer pharmacological thromboprophylaxis. And clearly, all the past evidence indicates that low liquid heparin is the mainstay of thromboprophylaxis. And also has the advantages of a convenience with a short half-life, good absorption, and also fewer drug interactions compared to the other anticoagulants. So our usual recommendation would be to administer a standard prophylactic dose of thromboprophylaxis, obviously adjusted for the body weight as well as the renal function. And there is evidence, I think, from our experience in the past year that the use of thromboprophylaxis does mitigate the risk of COVID-19 related thrombosis. So clearly, we have much more experience and knowledge about the use of anticoagulants in the course of the patient pathway, because it has become apparent that the thrombotic risk, as well as the bleeding risk, changes during the course of the patient pathway and the degree of inflammation in the patient.
So as you said, in your settings, you use it for all hospitalized patients. So we have hospitalized patients in the wards, on oxygen, off oxygen. We have patients in the ICU. So you use it in all the patients. And also I'll extend my question further. There has been a debate on the standard dose on thromboprophylaxis. As you also clearly mentioned, there's been VTE, even the patients who are on the thromboprophylaxis. So do we have to continue with the same dose, or there's something called an escalated thromboprophylactic dose, intermediate dose, and or maybe the therapeutic dose in some cases?
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting one, because what has become apparent is that the dose of the anticoagulation matters, and proportionate, I think, to the inflammation and the bleeding risk in the course of the patient pathway. And at the very least, my view is that all the patients, if the bleeding risk is low, should have the standard VT prophylaxis adjusted for the weight and the renal function. The early evidence indicated that the standard doses might be inadequate for critical care patients, and so intermediate dose thromboprophylaxis became widely adopted in clinical practice. For example, instead of using 40 milligrams once a day of enoxaparin, we were using 40 milligrams twice a day in critical care patients. So about a year on, there are results from randomized clinical trials which help us in our decision making. Because there are the multi-platform RCTs, the REMAP-CAP, ACTIVE, and ATTACK, which suggests that there might be a benefit from the use of therapeutic dose low liquid heparin early on in the process in the moderately affected patients on the ward. In fact, the preprint of the paper was just published in the past week, which demonstrated a small benefit with regard to organ support free days and survival to discharge. But the same multi-platform RCTs, on the other hand, demonstrated potential harm in the most severely affected patients on critical care, and also with an increased bleeding risk. There are other studies like the Coalition Action study, which was published in the last week, which, on the other hand, do not demonstrate a benefit from the use of therapeutic dose anticoagulation in moderately ill patients. So I think we have yet to understand more how to adjust the dosing in the course of the patient journey. I think a very, very important question that is yet to be answered is, the utility of intermediate or escalated dosing of low liquid heparin in critically ill patients. Because we know from the multi-platform studies that we should not be giving therapeutic dose in these patients who have much more aggressive inflammation and a much higher risk of alveolar hemorrhage. So there has been a recent study from Iran called the Inspiration study, which looked at intermediate dosing and failed to show a benefit compared to standard dosing. But there are many people who feel that this study was very underpowered to answer the question. And also the event rates of 3% VT in critical care patients was improbably low. So I think my current recommendation is to, at the very least, use standard dose VT prophylaxis in all the patients. And we await further RCTs to inform us about the value of intermediate dose low liquid heparin in critical care patients.
So very nicely summarized, Professor Aryan. I got your recommendation of standard prophylaxis dose, but what I could summarize from different studies was, one is definitely it's a dynamic disease. So even if certain had conclude maybe in the initial phase of the disease, escalated prophylactic dose might be beneficial, but again, it can't be throughout the disease, and one size doesn't fit all. So, is that what is the conclusion of the various studies?
Yes, I think there's still some uncertainty about the optimal approach to dosing, but there does seem to be some indication of a small benefit early in the patient pathway in the moderately ill patients on the ward from escalated doses of low molecular weight heparin. But then again, as I mentioned, there was another study in the ward patients with a high D-dimer, which did not show a benefit from using full dose low molecular weight heparin in moderately ill patients and an increased risk of bleeding. So I think we still await, a better understanding. But, as you say, it does seem to be the case that one size does not fit all. But again, it's a dynamic situation, and the patient who's on the ward in the morning could be in critical care in the afternoon, and it's the same patient. So I think we need better understanding as well about that interface, in the same patient, moving from one clinical area to the other, and what their risk is, particularly of bleeding.
Professor Arya, thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.